Okay, hello everyone. We are live for another COVID-themed live video. This is something that I'm trying to do roughly once a week at the moment, just providing what I'm seeing and what I'm observing in this current situation that we find ourselves in, and ultimately to help you guys through this situation, because COVID-19 is a challenge, it's an obstacle, it's an adversity. And I think all of the personal development work that we have been doing up until this point really starts to shine through in these types of situations that we find ourselves in. It's a similar analogy to the athlete who's training for the big event, that you put in all of those hours in the gym, all of those hours on the track, so that when you show up on the racetrack for 10 seconds, so when you make the 1.8 meter jump, you are in the place ready to perform at your best. And I think everything that we've been doing with Author Your Life so far, the journey that you guys have been on with me so far, all the other personal development work that I know you guys have done. I know that I'm not the only person that you get your source of training and expertise from. I know you're going out there and you're reading all the books, you're listening to all the podcasts, you're attending all the seminars, you're getting the coaching and mentoring. I know that you have been training yourself over this period of time, and this is where it starts to count. Right here, right now, is when the fruits of that work is starting to show. Have we got our minds in the right place? Have we got our routines in the right place? Have we got our purpose and motivation dialed in to get us through this situation? So I'm starting to see some eyeballs coming in on the left-hand side. Hello, everyone. Welcome. I hope that you are safe. I hope that you are well at this time. I think that's kind of the opening message that we all have at the moment when we're speaking to each other is, are you safe? Are you well? And I very much hope that that is the case for you guys here today as well. I hope that you are safe and I hope that you are well. What are we going to cover today? I want to just highlight a few language uses, some patterns in language that we've been using right since the start of this pandemic, that we've been using right since the start of lockdown, that I don't think are the healthiest uses of language. Language is so important in our lives because your language shapes the stories that you tell yourself about life. The stories that you tell yourself about life creates your truth. Your truth then creates your experience of reality. So if we look at language as the basic building block of the stories of your life, well, the stories of your life is what Author Your Life is all about, isn't it? So we're going to look at how can we use some better language around about this scenario so that we put ourselves in a better place psychologically, so that we start to create a different story about what's happening at the moment. Because we can't change the objective reality of what's happening. We can't change the fact that there's a virus. We can't change the fact that people are dying from that virus. We can't change the fact that for many of us, so much of our life, so much of our freedoms, our liberties are restricted right now. That is objective facts that we cannot change. Nothing we can do about it. What we need to think about instead is how we change our story around those objective truths. How we start to change not necessarily the situation, but our response to the situation. So that's what we're going to look at here with a couple of different language alterations. And the first one that I've got today is social distancing. Social distancing. This is something that we've been using right since the start of lockdown, that we've got to have this social distancing in place. And I think social distancing is not a very good way to describe what we actually need to do. This was actually highlighted by one of my podcast guests that I did for the Isolation Inspiration interview series, and they noted that we shouldn't be talking about social distancing, we should be talking about physical distancing. And what's really interesting, my wife works for the government, and last week they had an official memo sent out where it said we are now changing social distancing to physical distancing. That is now the official UK government terminology as of last week. And I think this is a overdue change in how we're looking at this. Because absolutely, we need to be physically distancing ourselves right now. Absolutely, we need to avoid coming into contact with each other to avoid transmission of the virus. But just because we are physically distancing does not mean that we are losing social contact. The bizarre thing about this situation is I actually feel that I am less socially distant with people I care about, people that I work with, people in my various communities than I ever have been before. It's been amazing. We've been doing our Zoom dinner dates and our Zoom pub quizzes, our Zoom mentoring sessions, our Zoom webinars, our Zoom meetings. I've been seeing people and speaking to people so much more than I actually ever did before. I have not been socially distancing myself. And I think when this terminology first came into play, people started to get upset and they started to feel this sense of isolation that, oh no, we have to socially distance. And I think this is where a lot of the feelings of loneliness started to come in. I feel this is where some of our mental health issues have started to come in, because people with this terminology saying I'm socially distancing myself, they then feel socially distant. And that does not have to be the case at all. Now, as I have said from the beginning of this situation as well, I did anticipate that loneliness would be a problem. And I think that my prediction has been vindicated in that regard, that loneliness is a problem, especially in single households, especially in the elderly population who maybe don't have this same familiarity and access to technology that us young'uns do with our Zooms and our FaceTimes and everything else. So absolutely, loneliness is still a problem, and I don't think loneliness goes away just because we're having these Zoom chats and these Zoom conversations. But what I think we can do to help ourselves in this situation is to start seeing ourselves as physically distancing, but recognize that we have the opportunity to still be socially close. And I think that's a really, really important reframe, and I think that's going to help some of the problems that we have with loneliness right now. So change social distancing to physical distancing. That's our first language shift of today. I can see a few people coming in. I see Karen, I see Fiona, I see Marta. Hello, welcome. Thank you for joining me here today. I've got a couple of eyeballs up on the left. I don't know if that's including all you guys, if there's some eyeballs where the names aren't showing up. Welcome nonetheless, whoever you are and wherever you're tuning in from today. Let's look at how I can see Wendy just coming in. Hello again, Wendy. Wendy, you've been watching a lot of my stuff recently in 2 different groups, actually. So thank you for joining me here today. Let's crack on and look at our second language shift. We've been talking about isolation, that we need to self-isolate, that we need to live in isolation, that we need to create as much isolation as possible. And again, very similar to this social distancing, when we start talking about isolation, this is putting us in a really bad frame of mind. It's putting us in a state where we start to feel lonely, we start to feel disconnected, and boy oh boy, if you want to have some mental health problems, then put yourself in a situation where you feel lonely and you feel disconnected. It's one of the fastest ways to get yourself into a really horrible and painful place. I see Carol coming in as well. Carol has said something emotionally close as well. Yes, yes. It's all about being emotionally close to people as much as we possibly can. Yes, we lose a little bit of our emotion because we can't do physical touch. Physical touch is a big part of how we connect as humans. If you look at the chemical changes that occur when we touch, when we have physical contact, we release oxytocin. Oxytocin is our connection hormone. So absolutely, we want to try and stay as emotionally close as possible. The physical touch aspect does limit that. But nonetheless, we can still find these ways to stay connected. And one way that we need to change this feeling of disconnection is we need to get rid of this word isolation. Isolation is not putting us in a good state, it's not putting us in a good frame of mind. What I think we need to do is, instead of seeing this as an isolation period, we need to see this as an incubation period. An incubation period. This is a shift that I did for myself right at the beginning of lockdown. In fact, even before lockdown, I've spoken a couple times on these videos that my wife and I had to self-isolate earlier than the lockdown, so we actually had a little bit of practice, for want of a better word, of what this lockdown situation was going to look like. And right from then I said, wow, what a great opportunity this is for me to do some more creative work, to do some more skill development, to do some more reflection. So I've been writing, I've been reading, I've been doing more filming, I created a new Facebook group at the start of the month. So I saw this as an incubation period where I could start beginning to develop projects. I could start beginning to grow things. I could start beginning to put in the foundations for what I want to build, grow, develop when all of this starts to release. When we start to come out of lockdown, when restrictions start to ease off a little bit. Carol saying incubation like a caterpillar into a butterfly. Perfect analogy, Carol. Absolutely perfect analogy. That what does the caterpillar need to do? I think this is actually a really good analogy now I start to think about it a little bit more. Before this lockdown, what were we doing? We were all like hungry caterpillars, weren't we? We were wriggling around everywhere and we were trying to eat as much as possible and do as many things as possible. We're in this busy, hectic state. And ultimately, as long as the caterpillar's in that busy, hectic state, it will remain a caterpillar. What does the caterpillar need to do in order to begin its metamorphosis? It needs to slow down, it needs to stop, and it needs to incubate. That is what we're doing right now. This situation has forced us to stop, forced us to slow down. Now that you are stopped and slowed down, what has opened up that you kept on brushing to the side that was maybe important to do but wasn't an urgent priority right now? How can you see this situation as that incubation period to start growing and developing something? So this could be something as simple as a skill, it could be something as simple as a project, or actually what I've been really encouraging people to do and pushing people to do is saying, do you want your life to go back to how it was before lockdown? I suspect for a lot of people the answer is no. That before lockdown you weren't living your life the way that you wanted to. That you weren't writing the story of your life that you thought you were capable of writing. What we talk about all the time in Author Your Life, don't we? We talk about this idea of writing a new story, starting a new chapter. Well, when lockdown starts to ease off and starts to finish, there will never be a better opportunity to start a new chapter of your life. We have just had the reset button pressed on all of us. During this incubation period, during this time between the finish of your last chapter and the start of the next one, how are you going to set yourself up to grow and evolve into something different? Whether that is purely just learning that new skill, starting that new project, or really starting to redesign your life. Now is the time to start thinking about that. Now is the time to start preparing for that. Now is the time to start working on that. Get out of isolation mindset and into incubation mindset. So that's our second language reframe that I think that we need to make. Our third language reframe, we're talking about being stuck at home. We're stuck at home. We're trapped with the household. We've got the spouse with us. We've got the kids with us. We get our one state-sanctioned exercise a day. We're stuck at home. And again, look at the negative connotations of this language. This idea of being stuck. This idea of being restricted. This idea of not having freedom. What if instead of seeing ourselves as stuck at home, we see ourselves as safe at home? And I think this is a really important reshift for some of the mental health issues that we're seeing right now, the anxiety or the frustration or the anger or the resentment. It's this idea of we're stuck at home, we're caged in, there is this swirling chaos around us, there's this looming threat and doom that is coming for us, that we're desperately trying to avoid and trying to protect ourselves against? What if instead we are safe at home? What if instead this period allows us to have safety, security, health, well-being? What a shift that is. What if we recognize that through doing our bit and staying safe at home, we are actually being contributors in overcoming this problem, in getting through this coronavirus situation? Through each of us doing our bit, staying safe at home, we are stopping the spread of the virus. We are preventing the strain on our health services. We are providing the opportunity for us to find ways to overcome this situation, to find the treatments, to get the protective equipment, to generate the vaccine. All of this stuff is enabled by us staying safe at home. And that's a completely different shift. We see ourselves as no longer being physically distant. We see ourselves as no longer being isolated. We see ourselves as no longer being stuck at home. And instead we have the opportunity to socially connect. We have the opportunity to incubate the next stage of our evolution. And we are able to do that from a place of safety and security. What a different scenario that is. And the thing about this scenario is nothing has changed. This scenario has been available to you this whole time. As I said earlier in this session, nothing about our objective reality has changed or is going to change for the foreseeable future. There is still a global pandemic. People are still dying. We are going to be in lockdown for a long time yet. Not just this sort of strict lockdown. I think we've still got months of that. Not weeks, but months. And even when the very strictest of lockdowns start to ease, we are still going to have semi-lockdown. We are still going to have restrictions. This situation is not going away anytime soon. And to be honest, there's very little that we can do to change that. There's very little that we can do to influence that. That is our objective reality. That is not changing. And I'm not pretending that any of this stuff that you do does change that objective reality. It doesn't. What this changing of language does do is it changes the story that we create about our reality, it changes the perspective that we have on our reality, and it changes our response to this reality. It changes our response from a very fearful, unhealthy one to a courageous and much more healthy one. And it all comes from changing 1, 2, 3 words. Change 3 words in your life right now, and the experience of your life is going to change a lot. What's Carol saying? Happy to have this opportunity. Yeah, brilliant, Carol. Happy to have this opportunity. Something like this is probably never going to happen again. This is our first real modern day pandemic. Our first pandemic in the globalized world. Yes, of course, we've had the pandemics before. We've had the Spanish flus, we've had the Black Deaths, but in this globalized situation where we can travel so fast, where we are so connected to other countries around the world, where we have this vast array of technology, this is probably the only time that we will have this type of pandemic. Are pandemics a part of the future? Yes, I think they are, but I think this will hopefully, fingers crossed, hopefully prepare us and help us to stop getting into a situation as bad as this again. Hopefully so. Obviously no guarantees there. But this is a very unique situation that we find ourselves in. We are getting to be a part of history right now. And that's perhaps an odd way of looking at things, but this is such a unique time in humanity. Instead of making the worst of it, why don't we make the best of it? Because it's very easy to make the worst of stuff. All you need to do is turn on the news and you can make the worst of things very easily. Why don't we try and make the best of things? Why don't we choose how we respond in this scenario? What's Carol saying? I have a home and food to eat, which is more than many people around the world. Absolutely, absolutely. And I know it's one of these kind of trite platitudes that everyone says, oh, think of all the things that you have to be grateful for. And to be honest, at times, I don't think that platitude is necessarily helpful because it sounds a little bit patronizing and it sounds a little bit like you are somehow taking the severity out of the situation. But this is still something that we need to remember and keep in check. For me, a huge word throughout our lives, and especially at this time, is perspective. It's all about keeping perspective on what's going on. That's not denying truth, that's not denying reality, it's just being able to see the bigger picture of things. And that's what I think these language changes are going to allow you to do. So I hope that these language changes are useful for you. Start bringing them into your everyday vernacular a little bit more. I've been, over the last maybe 2 weeks, trying to stop myself saying social distancing and say physical distancing instead. It's something that still slips out from time to time. To stop talking about isolating and start talking about incubating. And don't feel like you're stuck at home. Feel like you are safe at home. And with that, on that final note, let me just say once again, stay safe, stay healthy. I hope you're doing well. I hope your families are doing well. I hope that you're all managing to get through this situation as best as you possibly can. And I'm going to be here on a regular basis, providing my observations, my thoughts, potential strategies and perspectives that we can take to make this situation a little bit better and hopefully to help us all overcome and get out of this situation. So thank you for everyone who's joined here on the live today. Thank you for your engagements. Thank you for your comments. I hope this has proved useful for you, and I'll be coming up with another one of these live ones very soon. As I said, I'm trying to do them about once a week, just based on what's coming to me, what I'm seeing, what I'm speaking to people about. So this is going to be something that's fairly regular, so look out for another live at some point next week. Okay folks, enjoy the rest of your day, have some social connection, have some incubation, and feel that feeling of safety. I'll speak to you soon.